Hi everyone, and welcome to our module on deletion syndromes. In this video we're going to talk about a number of rare genetic conditions that result from partial deletion of a chromosome. So this is different from disorders where you gain or lose an entire chromosome. It's also different from disorders where you gain or lose a single gene. In this situation, part of a chromosome is lost. It may be the entire long or short arm, or it may be a portion of the long or short arm. Most of these syndromes are believed to occur due to errors in crossover during meiosis. In the video on meiosis, I explain the phenomena of crossover as shown at the bottom of the screen, where genes that are being duplicated exchange genetic material so that the end product is a mixture of genes from different chromosomes. What's believed to lead to some of the deletion syndromes is an unbalanced exchange of genes during crossover in meiosis, such that one chromosome ends up with extra genetic material or a duplication and another ends up with a deletion. Most cases of deletion syndromes are sporadic. In other words, they are not passed down through families. You'll see them referred to in textbooks as congenital. And the key syndromes that we'll discuss in this video are Cri-du-Chat, Williams syndrome, and finally thymic aplasia. Cri-du-Chat syndrome is caused by deletion of part of the short arm of chromosome 5. So chromosomes have a short and a long arm. The short arm is denoted by the letter P, and for that reason this syndrome is sometimes called the 5p- syndrome. Children with this syndrome have severe intellectual disability. They have cognitive, speech, and motor delays. The reason it's called Cri-du-Chat is because the infants will cry like a cat. It's classically described as a mewing, which is a high-pitched cry. This occurs soon after birth and then resolves. These children have characteristic facial features, which is shown in this picture on the screen. They typically have a small head, which is referred to as microcephaly. They have wide-set eyes, which is sometimes referred to as hypertelorism. They also have low-set ears, a small jaw, and a rounded face. Children with Cri-du-Chat syndrome often have congenital heart disease. They can develop ventricular septal defects, PDAs, tetralogy of Fallot, and many other congenital heart problems. Our next deletion syndrome is called Williams syndrome. It's also called Williams-Beren syndrome. This is caused by a partial deletion of the long arm of chromosome 7. The deleted portion includes an important gene called elastin, which codes for an elastic protein in connective tissue. So children who have this deletion have what's called haploinsufficiency, meaning because they are missing one of their elastin genes, they produce insufficient amounts of the protein. Children with Williams syndrome have a facial appearance that is classically described as elfin. You can Google this and find lots of pictures online of children who have Williams syndrome, and you'll begin to easily recognize the facial appearance. They have a small nose and a small chin. They also have a wide mouth, and they have a long philtrum, which is the length of the upper lip. These children have intellectual ability and they often show delayed developmental milestones. However, interestingly, they have very well developed verbal skills and have a unique personality where they're extremely friendly with strangers, they're unafraid of strangers, and they have great interest in talking with adults, which is unusual for many children. There are some unusual and uncommon vascular manifestations of Williams syndrome, and if you know these, it's very easy to recognize Williams syndrome in a board question. The first one is called supravalvular aortic stenosis. This is a constriction of the ascending aorta just above the aortic valve. So it behaves like aortic stenosis, but it's caused by a constriction of the aorta above the valve. That's why it's called supravalvular. And there's a very high prevalence among children who have Williams syndrome. In addition, these children can also develop pulmonary artery stenosis and renal artery stenosis. So they are developing narrowings of large arteries in the vascular system. This is very unusual, and if you see these things described in a child, they are probably talking about Williams syndrome. These children also can develop hypercalcemia. In general, they have higher calcium than the pediatric population. There's evidence of increased vitamin D levels and increased sensitivity to vitamin D among children with Williams syndrome. It's usually not severe, it's usually mild to moderate, and usually does not cause symptoms. However, it is thought that it may contribute to constipation, which is common in children with Williams syndrome. The last deletion syndrome I'll discuss is thymic aplasia or DeGeorge syndrome. I discussed this disorder in detail in the immunology section in the video on immune deficiency syndromes, and the reason I talk about it there is because one of the key features of this disorder is immune deficiency. This disorder goes by many different names that can be confusing as a student. It's sometimes simply called a 22q11 deletion syndrome, and that's because it results from a partial deletion of the long arm of chromosome 22. It's also sometimes referred to as velocardiofacial syndrome or Spritzen syndrome or conotruncal anomaly of the face syndrome. And the reason it has all these different names is because the clinical presentation is widely varied, but some of the key features include immune deficiency, hypocalcemia, and congenital heart defects. And that concludes our video on deletion syndromes.